you see that the basic human needs are still a challenge to be accessed. Human development is still very low, and people are to a very annoying extent hungry, that 25% of people in sub-Saharan Africa go to bed hungry every night. 25%. And it seemed that we were seeing some people who can be part of this, including some of us, and it's a very big challenge. And that actually 60% of the hungry are women and children, which puts a question mark on the main attitude towards the catering of these now. You can say marginalized, sometimes that is the language that is using. And in the second paragraph, the writers intended to show the picture that to a certain extent, Africa's problems are by ourselves, and cited examples like corruption, and other examples like having resources of Africa leaving the continent, and by Africans deliberately. It seems to be a common practice that many rich people, for instance, prefer keeping their money in the offshore banks outside Africa and etc. And we think economically it may have an impact. And indeed, the debt crisis, etc., as you know. And the last paragraph attempts to also say that there are also external factors that attribute to this economic malaise of the African people. And one of those examples is that it seems to be very true that Africa was deliberately marginalized in the global economic system. This opinion was shared with one of the former ministers of UK, who actually was counter-arguing or trying to reason out Obama. Obama then had said that Africa's problem is leadership. Then a certain political veteran from UK who interacted with some of us said that that is a bit simplistic. That the problem is much wider than leaders, and that also Africa was deliberately marginalized in the global economic system. And lastly, you also know these always flying allegations or rumors or information that Africa is manipulated by Western powers, etc., etc. So, we want to examine today, in our various thinking, thoughts, what do we think is the actual problem and what can be the solution? And whether Africa is indeed on course towards solving this challenge. And lastly, as is our norm, our quotation tonight goes that more gold has been mined from the thoughts of men than has been taken from the earth, attributed to Napoleon Hill.
For me, it's not the topic, the dynamics of Africa's poverty and the way forward. What is poverty? Now let me ask colleagues, how many of you think that Africa is poor? Just show my hands, I'm interested. How many of you will agree to a statement that Africa is poor? Just show my hands. Yeah, be bold. How many of you, okay, one there. You still confirm that Africa is poor? Okay, how many of you think that Africa is not poor? How many of you think that Africa is not poor? How many of you don't know whether Africa is poor? What is poverty? Poverty, by my definition, is lack of resources. Resources to get the things that we need. Simple. Don't go to World Bank and look for any definition. Once you don't have resources, you are poor. Poverty is about resources. Let me get back to the question again. If that is the definition, if you agree with me that the definition appropriate for within our context for poverty is lack of resources, let's make it simple. I don't think this continent is poor. So the issue of poverty is not discussable. What we should be discussing is, why are we so rich in resources and yet we are languishing with need hanging around our necks? Why is it that we are so rich in resources? What is causing that ripple, that arrangement? Where is it coming from? So the issue I will want to discuss today, well, under the same topic, is why is it that Africa is so rich and yet Africans are languishing in poverty? My brothers and sisters, this issue for me is an issue we can spend a whole year to try to figure out. I'll give you the same old examples I used to give when I talk about poverty. The Arab Gulf has only oil as a resource. Even the water they drink, they import it. The food they eat, they import it. Everything they use, they bring it from elsewhere. But why are they not languishing? They have only one resource. One, oil. And they are driving the nicest of cars. They are living in the best of castles. Why do we have uranium? We have gold. We got diamonds. We got manganese. We have bauxite. We have oil, massive. How come? The things I'm mentioning are underground. Now come to the surface. Fresh water, green vegetation, good soils. Those are the resources. Those are the things that we need to use to get the things that we need. And we have them. The question is, why are we behaving like kings, princes and princesses, walking about in rags? What is turning us into that? That is where my focus will be today. That is the issue. Africa is not poor. We don't need to discuss that. It's obvious. We know it. Look at the fresh waters. Look at the green vegetation. Look at the soils. Go in our air. The climate is very good. It rains and sun. It rains and shines in Kampala, Uganda every day. Where else can you find that? What is happening? Where is the problem coming from? Look, brothers and sisters, it is time for us to begin to search for the truth about who we are and begin to work on our perceptions of our own selves. Yeah, if you're an African and you sit here and you think that you're poor, you've gotten it wrong. It is time we begin to question our perceptions. How do we look at ourselves in our minds? We are living on this continent and we have accepted a branding, a sticker pasted on our forehead. Africa, you are poor. And we have accepted it without thinking, without asking any questions, without looking around us, without figuring out what we have, who we are, where we are coming from. Let's think about it. The issue of poverty in Africa is not discussable. What is discussable is why are we so rich in terms of resources. You use your resources to get the things you need. It's as simple as that. You don't need to be a rocket scientist to know that you use what you have to get what you want. And you can't have all of these, oil, uranium, gold, diamonds, bauxite, manganese, name it, timber, fish, food.
And visionary leadership, people.
And yet, you're walking about, everybody's crying. What is the problem? Where is the problem? For me, the problem is the identity crisis in which we have entangled ourselves. We are in a very deep identity crisis. We don't even know that we are rich. So we have accepted the tag poverty. We are in a very terrible identity crisis. It begins, I'll go back to my same old thing, with Africans walking about in European names.
Yes.
Yeah, Europeans are not walking about in African names. You have lost your identity. You have disconnected from your source. You are lost. Number two, you go to school, they teach you. When you go to school and you get to your school late, the punishment they give you is to go and dig, to go and do some groundwork, to work in the farm. Yet, all the resources that we have on this earth are in the belly of the earth. And education teaches you that the earth is dirty. You are not supposed to touch the earth. So education moves, this kind of education we have, moves you away from your resources. To the extent that the more educated you are, the more you run away from your own roots.
So what have you done about it?
We have accepted systems through our relationship with Europe that we do not even understand. And we are struggling to implement systems we cannot relate to. It is creating confusion for us. We are not understanding it. We are not asking any questions. We are just there compromising and justifying things we don't even understand. People said, teach them to read, but not to reason. In the 18th
presidential advisor, I'm sure, I think on finance planning. Yes. And he is recently a distinguished visiting fellow, Brookings Institution. I hope I mentioned that correct. And other very crucial positions held in which he served very diligently our society. He is the former Minister of Finance, Planning and Economic Development.
And the best finance minister in Africa.
And also was chairman, managing director, Uganda Commercial Bank, which you all know was the spinal cord of our economy, and we achieved a lot out of it. I want to inform you, our dear professor, our main guest tonight, that you have always been an inspiration to us in the various forums where we have listened to you. We have always got inspired, and it was a challenge to the management of this forum, the members requesting that we should someday bring Professor Ezra Suruma here and share with him the expertise he has in the economics. I think I missed to mention that he is a professor of economics, and with us also is Professor Edward Kakonge, who is your colleague, having been also a former member of cabinet in this mighty government. He was the first local government minister in the NRM government. And on your right is Dr. James Kimera, is a part-time lecturer at Makerere University, and also very importantly, offering voluntary work or assisting our community in the education sector. He has schools where he is offering free, largely, education, and to a minor extent, subsidized education. But of course, indeed, there are a lot of such efforts also taking place elsewhere. We are not the only ones, but we said we shall do our part to make our thinking better by coming here and think together. And as you saw in our concept statement, our quotation tonight is more gold has been mined from the thoughts of men than has been taken from the earth. We have mentioned some figures here of people who go to bed hungry. There is a source that is suggesting that 25% of the people in sub-Saharan Africa go to bed hungry every night. etc. So what is the problem, and what can we do, and is Africa on course? I now take the pleasure to invite you, our main guest, to give us your thoughts, and then you'll have comments and questions from the members thereafter. Dear Professor, you are welcome.
Thank you very much, Mr. Jagadana. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. I'm impressed that instead of going to drink and carouse around, you are engaged in intellectual activity. It's a very, very uplifting and encouraging way of spending a Friday afternoon or Friday evening. I studied in the United States, and on Fridays they usually go to have a good time. This is the time of the week that almost everyone goes into having a good time. But if in your case you are trying to find a way out of poverty, I think it's a very good sign for Africa, and I hope you continue. The dynamics of Africa's poverty and the way forward is a very big topic. We have been dealing with this most of our life. I think we made a contribution, but the problem remains large. And we have to recognize that the problem requires time. It cannot be sort of instant. It requires time because it requires change in the behavior of men and women. I think it is useful to look at the problem of poverty eradication or alleviation or reduction from the point of view of the individual and also from the point of view of society as a whole. I think it is useful to look at what we can do as individuals or as members of a family, because many of the struggles we are involved in, we struggle at a family level, at an individual level, but at the same time we are part of the entire society and of the whole country and the continent, and the region, the continent. And these are different levels of struggle, isn't it? And I think that it's helpful to look at the dynamics that are bearing on you as an individual attempting to survive in a very difficult environment, and what you can do as an individual to improve your quality of life. And at the same time, of course, realize that you are a part of a society, and that the two are moving together. But of course, realize that society can get better without all individuals getting better. And so the fact that Uganda has been growing 6% per year doesn't mean that every individual has had their income increase by that rate. For some, they have fallen through the cracks. For others, there has been a general rise. Now, I think that therefore, at the microeconomic level, in our case, the microeconomics is really the economics of the family. The family is the productive unit, or has been traditionally, but since 80% of the people are still living in rural areas, most of them are in agriculture. About over 60% are still organizing at the micro level, whether it's in keeping animals or in cultivating the land, or they are carpenters or having some skills. Still they are working, operating, organized as the family unit. Very few of us have been able to organize large corporations or large companies yet. Now, at that microeconomic level, I think we come face to face with the poverty problem, with how to survive, with food security, having enough food, producing enough food to eat, enough variety of food to eat, and being able to afford very, very basic needs, such as soap, to wash and be clean, and build a home, a decent home, in which to shelter. So I think we don't want to be so grandiose, to speak at such a grand scale that we forget the point of survival at which most of our people find themselves, and how they cope and how they change from very primitive means of survival to something better. And I think you will appreciate, therefore, that when I talk about change being gradual and being slow, that this is a real problem, a real issue of how a family in a rural place, in Kacherere, where I come from, in my village, how a family there improves its standard of living to something better than they were born in. And I think that we find that when we confront this realistically, we find it is extremely complex. I went to visit my elder sister, who lives on a peninsula that is, she gets her water from the lake, from Lake Minyoni. And she said, she complained that the beans are drying because there have been no rain. So I said, why don't you get water from the lake and water the beans? She said, you child, what's wrong with you? You will think that I'm mad to fetch water and pour on the beans. So it was inconceivable to her that she could irrigate the beans. The water is just a few meters away, but the beans are drying and she's waiting for the rain to come, and so that she, and her survival is at stake. But she's simply doesn't see that what we call irrigation is something that could easily, and in her case quite easily, change her method of survival. I brought tea seedlings, had them planted in the land that they had given me. I said, I'm planting these tea seedlings. You're the ones who will gather the tea when I'm away, because I will not be here to benefit from the tea leaves that you pick. So please look after it and make sure that everything is okay. The tea seedlings dried. Why? Because the idea that they could be watered simply hadn't sunk in. Maybe you can say they are lazy, I don't know. But tea seedlings dried. So, change, therefore, is a complex phenomenon. I attended a seminar yesterday, not a seminar, but a meeting of National Planning Authority. We were talking about household agriculture, how changing smallholder agriculture, and summarizing over the years the success and failures. And the fact of the matter is that we have failed to increase productivity in agriculture. So we've failed significantly and pitifully, I must say. And I can assure you that it's not out of a lack of will. There have been so many programs, plan for modernization of agriculture, plan for whatever eradication of poverty, so many plans, so many programs, so much money, funding from donors and other agencies, but productivity, agricultural productivity, has grown minimally. And that means, therefore, that the amount of, this is why, partly a good explanation of why incomes have not risen in rural areas, or have risen very little, because the increase in income is a result of producing more from the same land, producing 3 or 4 or 5,000 kilograms of maize from a hectare of land instead of 600 or 1,000 kilograms. That's what productivity is about. but it has not worked very well. We are still among the lowest producers of agricultural productivity. And this has to be changed. We can't give up. We have to continue the struggle of changing attitudes and changing skills of our people where they are. It's not enough to change where they are not. Okay, it's good that skyscrapers are going up in Kampala, but for the people who are in agriculture, where they are is where they are, and where we need to assist them and find a way of raising productivity. Now, I've argued in many times that certainly using fertilizer would help. But when I mention fertilizer, many people say, you want to kill our land. What is in this fertilizer? How will it affect our soils? We have to keep adding it. If we have to keep adding it, then we don't want it. But the agricultural people tell me that if you grow crops without putting back fertility into the land, you're mining the land. It's like taking minerals out, and they are out and they are gone and they're for good. It's the same way the plants take minerals and other nutrients out of the land, and you have to put them back. You don't put them back, the soil becomes less and less productive. But it takes a great deal of work to convince our brothers and sisters to change the way that even our educated class are not convinced that fertilizer is good. But if you look at the figures and see production all over the world, you look at the countries which use fertilizer and the countries which don't, the correlation of the non-fertilizer using countries as poor and low-income countries vis-a-vis those who are using large quantities of fertilizer and having large production, productivity, you see that maybe you need to change your approach or your attitude towards fertilizer. My argument, therefore, is that immediately we need to see how the Ethiopians and Malawians and Zambians, to some degree, have been able to raise productivity significantly. And we apply the same method of subsidizing fertilizer, because most of our people are in agriculture and we have to help them where they are today. There is a huge attitudinal program a burden on every one of us to change our attitude towards work, towards service, and towards what we mean by employment and unemployment. The paradox is that it's like of my sister, really. There's water all around her and she's complaining of drought. There is poverty all around us. There is need. What is poverty after all? We're talking about the needs that people have for food, for homes, good homes, for clothing, for medicine, for shoes, for education, for good health care when they are ill or when they are old. These are the things we're talking. Poverty means eliminating these or satisfying these needs, isn't it?
Yes.
The more of these needs are met, the more we deal effectively with the issue of poverty. But how can we all sit around here and say, poverty, 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 and we are not actively working on these programs? And like the water is sitting here, and I'm saying, I'm thirsty, I'm thirsty, I'm thirsty. But there's water here, why don't you drink it? So, there are many poor people who need services. There are many sick people who need to be attended. So that means we need a large number of nurses. Now, many of you are saying it's the government's problem. It's not the government's problem. It's your problem and my problem. If my sister is sick, it's not the government's problem. I am the one to do something about it. Now, of course, there is a role for the government. But the primary problem is one of us as a society and our attitude and our realization that we need to do something, we need to make a contribution to solving the problem. Now, a big part of the attitudinal problem is the issue of money. Everybody complains that there is no money. And it is true that there is no money. But the money is printed in proportion to the wealth that's being created. If we print money to give everybody money, we'll go back to 1986, 85, 70s, when there was plenty of money and there were no goods and services to be had. Everybody had money, but there were no services to buy, and there were no products to buy. So we try to go away from that into a situation where hopefully once you have money, there are goods and services to be bought. So I think that one of the most immediate problems we need to resolve is that you start by offering a useful service or producing a product that people need or want. And when you do that, you are effectively dealing with the problem of poverty. Of course, you'll say, how do I do that? Well, the family in the village effectively deals with its needs by going to the garden, by organizing themselves as labor, having some tools, however primitive, form of a hoe, and having the land. And with that combination, you have an organization that is sufficient to produce food. Critical, very, very critical organization. Before you look down on what they do, you better compare what you are doing with what they are doing. They have a well-organized, complete system of producing a product. And they consume some of that product and they market some of that product. Now, a big disconnect that you and I have, who have come to the town, is that we don't have a parallel technology for producing a product in town. The people in the villages have a system in place. You may call it primitive, you may call it of low productivity, but at least it's there, and they are meeting a big part of their needs in that way. But we who have come to town find ourselves without a parallel system for meeting our needs. You come to town, you don't have a place to stay. You don't have any tools to work with. You only have your head, which has learned a bit of arithmetic and literacy, and you think you are very big, but you don't have any tools to work with. You don't have any land to work with. You don't have an office. You don't have a factory. So you are lost in the city. You don't have a parallel productive system. The person in the rural area is better off than you because he has a system of production. So now the question is, now that you are in town, you are running to town, we are all running to town, where is the system of production parallel to the one that we left in the village? It's not there. We are saying that the government should do something. But the government is you and me. We're all looking for jobs in the government. There are maybe 500,000 of them, maybe less. But we are millions of us who have come out of school. And we don't know how to make pens, and we don't know how to make paper. These are systems of the white people. So now we are lost. So we are able to provide some services. And that's why the service sector is the one which is growing fastest. We can push a wheelbarrow and transport a bag of beans and we get paid something. That's a service. We can drive a border transportation. That's a service. You require some capital. You can, if you have a skill as a doctor, of course you can offer medical help. That's a good service. You may get a job in a bank. That's an important service. You may become a preacher. That's a service. Many people are serving very well that way. So, many of us, I think, are finding that perhaps services are the sector where we can make some headway. I think this is fine. Many of us are going into IT and telecommunications and computers and what have you. This is okay, where we are picking from the Western world and now even the Eastern world. This is fine. But I think that there is a crisis of excessive dependence on imported products because our industries are very undeveloped or underdeveloped. But many of us don't even want to consume products which are produced locally because we look down on them. And we have to do more to protect our industries, although I say that, many people will scream that I'm a protectionist. So, on the macroeconomic scale, in terms of national organization, so I think I don't have the whole day. I can obviously speak the whole day if I had the time. By way of conclusion, at the microeconomic level, you can see that there is a serious crisis of us becoming employed in useful activities, providing the services that we desperately need, but perhaps the economic organization, the microeconomic organization, the organization by the entrepreneurs, thinking on what I can do. I'm proud to say that as a founder member of UGAFORD, Uganda Agency for Development, we've been assisting the active poor for the last 18 years, giving loans to someone who has a tin of tomatoes. We give them a loan, so instead of a tin, they can buy a bag or charcoal. Just adding a little bit to their capital, so they can do a little bit better, and then slowly they develop their capital and they can start even employing other people instead of just themselves. So there is a crisis of organization at the microeconomic level in terms of small businesses, small enterprises for providing services. So I want to urge you to have an eye for the needs of others, to have an eye and a sympathy for your fellow man and woman. It's not always true that you maximize your welfare by minimizing the welfare of others. I think sometimes by attempting to maximize the well-being of others, we find ourselves, our own welfare being maximized.
Yeah.
So the fact that you are not paying me to be here this evening does not mean that I have wasted my time. God has ways of making sure that I benefit from doing what I'm doing. And I'm confident that that will be so. So although my calculation, maybe somebody will say, why is Suruma wasting his time talking to these people instead of going to check on his garden or on his cows or whatever? I say that I have lived long enough to know that there is a way in which God in heaven meets my needs. and it will continue to meet my needs from doing what I do and trying to do it well. So I think that attitude of what can I do for somebody else. I tell friends and even non-friends that all the money in the world is in the hands of people. Everybody wants money, but you forget that every money is in somebody's pocket. They have earned it, and in order to get it, you have to convince them to give it to you, isn't it? Of course, you can steal it from them, but that's not acceptable. So, for you to persuade me to pay you my money, give you some of my money, you must do something useful for me. You must become my friend. You must do some activity that I think is worthy of me rewarding you. And this is what we're talking about. We're talking about an attitude of providing products and services that people want and people need. And in that process, we eliminate poverty. I want you to have that attitude of what can I do to contribute to the basket of goods and services in Uganda. What can I do? You must have an eye for what you can do, or what you should do. Maybe you have to borrow a bit of capital from somewhere. Many people who have started large organizations have started by using their savings, cranking, innovating, and doing something differently. And I must say that one of the most impressive aspects of Western civilization, in America in particular, where I've had a chance to live, is the degree of innovation, creativity. So don't be too concerned about the fact that this pen is the way it is. Can't you make something different, even if you are making it out of clay? Something with somebody say, oh, I prefer this is bigger. It doesn't have to be so small, but maybe it will be at half the price of this one. So you go around and saying, my friends, this thing also works. Try it. And somebody will say, yeah, this thing is working. You put Uganda on it. Say, yeah, why don't we use Uganda pen? Why do we always use these imported pens? And the creativity is critical. We don't have to do or to use things that are already in place or that are imported. We can also persuade our fellow countrymen and women to use the things that we are creating here. So I've seen people who are collecting garbage. They come and they collect. They formed garbage companies. They take it. I don't know where they take it, but they're doing it. They get paid. I've seen people who are making beads out of paper, out of waste paper, and so on, and selling them. All kinds of crafts. This is how we tackle the problem of poverty. But even beyond creating new things, is doing things that are already in existence, doing them a little bit better, especially in areas of for example, of looking after people who are ill, people who are weak. If you can find a way to look after such people, to give them a little bit better care, you are doing something that they need desperately, and in the process you can also be rewarded in one way or another. So it's the organizational aspect, the entrepreneurial aspect, the innovational aspect, the creative aspect that I think is critically needed at an individual level and family level to bring ourselves a little bit higher than where we are, and having a sensitivity about the needs, each other's needs. That's what society, that's what the economy is about. It's change. It's not the wealth, it's a means. So it's only when you put in the basket that you can take out, isn't it? When you go to the supermarket, you're saying, I have contributed somewhere, and now I have a right to take out of the basket that we call a supermarket. But you can't just take out without putting in. So you need to be deeply concerned about what is it that I can put in this basket that we call the Ugandan economy. And that's a question of looking at your talent, looking at the gifts that God has given you, where you have been placed, and how you can make the best use of these gifts that you have as an individual, as a family, or as a community. And then from there, I don't know how much time I have left, probably all gone, but I spend a lot of time on the micro aspect because I think it touches each of us individually. What's my role? How do I survive? How do I improve my condition? At the macroeconomic level, there's still a lot to be done. There's the infrastructure, for example, the poor roads that everybody complains about, law and order, failure to enforce contracts, land titles that are fake, problems of the budget, of price stability, putting too much money in the system, taxation, being fair with the taxes. That's at the national level, at the societal level. We are struggling with that. If you use your vote wisely instead of selling it, you will help to improve, to put in people, in government, people who are efficient and who are good. But if you say, when I went to ask for votes and started talking, the people said, Mzee, why are you wasting your time talking? Just give us our drink and you go, we know what you want. So, they're not interested in my message. They just want my little contribution to their appetite, and then it doesn't matter whom they vote for. They vote for whoever they feel has contributed best to their immediate need. That's the wrong attitude. Then we want to have a better government. And we need a better government. We need a good environment for doing business. If you can't get your license unless you bribe someone, that's an absolute waste, and we have to fight that. And there's a culture which has, I'm afraid, has increased in Uganda, the culture of dishonesty and of fraud and of corruption. This culture is deadly. A friend of mine told me that corruption actually refers to the decay of a dead body. Yes. So if you have a corrupt society, it's a body that is decaying. And those of us who have the attitude of participating in corruption, we are accelerating the process of decay, and this is wrong. And until we change our attitude and say that this is wrong and we don't want it, our society will die. We cannot have an economy in which everybody is stealing from everybody else. It doesn't make sense. In which everybody is trying to get something for nothing. It doesn't make sense. It just won't work. We are headed toward the ditch. It just doesn't work. It's stupid and foolish. And it has to be fought. Because it's killing us. We are killing each other. You can't steal all the money of the government and then complain about the roads. You have no right to complain. So as long as we, and the government is us, we are the ones who are stealing. We are on, each of us is looking for his chance to go in government so they can steal. And that's a very wrong attitude. So I want to therefore say that we cannot steal our way out of poverty. It's not possible. We can impoverish one another that way, but it cannot solve the problem until we simply kill each other and chaos, and until a point comes when people say enough is enough, and whether it will be a dictator I don't know, and somebody will come and attempt to use very, very rough methods to change the way that we are behaving. And we lose a lot of lives. There will be a lot of punishment, But if children won't behave, then the father has to use very hard methods to change the society. So the macroeconomics are important. Macroeconomics is important. The way that we organize collectively, and being civil and behaving properly, and obeying the law, and respecting the laws that we are making. We spend so much money to elect a parliament, then when they make the laws, we don't obey them. Why are we wasting time with all this money in parliament? We don't want to obey the laws. Something has to change. The culture has to change. I realize that change takes time. We are learning the hard way. The Chinese said that there are 3 methods of learning. One is imitation, which is the earliest. We could imitate some of the good things in other parts of the world. Second, I think is, understanding, which is the noblest. And the third is by experience, and that is the bitterest. You steal, and you are caught, and you're beaten, and you learn that stealing is bad, the hard way. But if you had listened to what I said, you'd have saved yourself the beating, the hard experience. So, I hope that we can learn quickly and progress. Having said all that, having been around a little bit longer than most of you, having been around here in 1970s, 80s, 90s, and now 2000s, the situation is definitely much better than it was in the 1970s.
The very important things of having resources which actually we don't utilize for our benefit. And you pointed out the issue of somebody who was living near a lake which is full of water, and yet was complaining of drought in his garden nearby. Actually, the message is that there are certain resources which are available, which we should make use of. The other related example of that kind of thing is, and here really I think the government should participate in this, the rains we have. We have these seasonal rains. Soon after, we have drought. The water has gone. It has come in plenty and disappears without us, maybe as a government, making use of that water. In my view, I suggest that, particularly in agricultural sense, government should really make an effort to make use of our seasonal rains. First of all, during those rains, there is plenty of grass. And we have agriculturists who can actually harvest that grass, convert it into silage, and store it. So when the dry season comes, animals have something to eat. But also that water can be trapped, so that during the dry season, that water can be utilized usefully to sustain that period of dryness. But I think he raised very fundamental issues which I think he did not highlight the background to this point. Ability to use these resources. How much training do we put in our people so that they can actually use these resources? So I think we need a lot of training and quality training to cultivate your minds, to culture your minds in ability to use the skills which God has given you. And I want to emphasize This is not going to come cheaply. Yeah? You and the government has to invest so that we have quality education, which will result in quality products which can utilize the talents they have developed through education. I want to really emphasize that. Without quality education, really quality education, not just this Bondaba this kind of thing, we're not going to move very far. Because I know the development in America, for example, in agriculture. Yeah? There was a lot of skills which were being put in agriculture. Educational skills. And later on, that was put in agricultural production. And the people who are highlighting or rather spearheading this kind of development, agricultural movement, were skilled mentally. They knew what they were doing. So, the best infrastructure in education, for me, is important. If we are going to utilize the resources we have. Also, you talked a bit about technologies in agriculture. I think I would want to advise him about fertilizer. Fertilizer can be a problem if they're used continuously for a long period. Because the general fertilizer we have contain components which are called nitrates. Now, unfortunately, when you fertilize a field, not all the nitrates are used. Some of them actually remain and are dissolved, and then actually they end up in water tables. And water tables with a high concentration of nitrates are not good water tables. So we have to be careful in the way we use fertilizers. Even phosphate, if it is used in moderate amounts, it's okay. But if it is used in large quantities, and then it is not incorporated in plants, it can be a problem. So, me, I would ask for caution on wanting to rely extensively on fertilizers. But unfortunately, there are other fertilizers natural fertilizers which we don't make use of. For example, the sewage corporation, they process all the waste products in homes, which is good. And it produces very, very, very important fertilizers, which are natural. And we never hardly make use of that. And as you know, you have seen where garbage is dumped in some areas. Is it Kitezi or whatever it is? Someplace. Now, if we had the imaginative leadership, that thing should be being converted into organic fertilizers, which can increase our agricultural production. So, on the micro level, as he was trying to put that, I think we need a lot of educational input so that these people can usefully use their talents to transform the resources. I don't have much time, but I want to go back a bit to the first president. I think I agree with his basic attitude that we have resources which we don't exploit to the benefit of Africa. Unfortunately, many of these resources are being put into foreign hands, and exploited the benefit of foreign hands. The oil, we have huge resources in oil as a continent. We actually, our timber and forests are being exploited not for our own benefit, but for benefit of others. So we have to be very careful, and we need really as a continent and African governments with this AU, I think they should focus on how much should Africa benefit from the natural resources found in Africa. I can assure you, Africa is not benefiting much. Some years ago, I went to US. Actually, I was a guest of the State Department, and I was taken in one of the reserve banks. And I was shocked when I was told, this was 1988, I was told that some staff was telling me that more than 80% of the gold at that time, which was gold reserve, had come from Africa. And I wondered how much Africa had benefited from that huge sum, which amounts of gold in the Reserve Bank of America. So I would urge really oil to take this matter seriously of how much we should benefit from our resources. Finally, he raised the issues of Africa, and then the issue of names, and the issue of the challenge that lady from here. Actually, I don't think that was a fair challenge, because actually India is the largest exporter of hair to Western countries, of course for the use of women there. So it's not only African who use the artificial hair, those people are also using hair. Then the issue of names. First of all, scientifically, Africa is the cradle of humanity. We may not know it, but now is acknowledged scientific fact that the human race originated from Africa. So in that context, we have not quarreled so much with the names. Because what is in the name? Particularly where we are. Particularly where we are. No, let me explain. Because you find, let me tell you find Africans on almost every continent. And some of them have lost their names, but they still contribute in their way. Of course, when it comes to Africa, if the name is not imposed to you, if you choose voluntarily that name, me, I would have no problem. But our people in USA, in Latin America, whose names were imposed. Yes, they're changing them. But what I'm saying, the names were imposed. So if you have a name, imposed name, you should voluntarily change it. But if we have chosen the name, whether it is from, and very often in our case it is the religious name, but we still have our local names. So there, me, I wouldn't quarrel so much with foreign name per se. Is what you can contribute to your continent, whatever name you bear. Thank you, man.
Okay. Now let's have a few minutes to hear from Dr. James.
Okay, thanks very much, Mr. Chairman.
I wish to begin by also registering my appreciation to Professor Sroma for the work well done. Thank you very much for your good insight on this very important topic, the dynamics of Africa's poverty and the way forward. I will not have much. I have just specific points to put forward. I want to echo the definition of poverty, basic human needs. For me, I would say poverty is a state of being where individuals cannot manage to secure basic needs of life. And in a very simple way, we can say it is about lack. Poverty, to me, it can be culture. When you look at the causes of poverty, it can be culture. Yeah, culture, actually, culture can breed poverty. Yes, when the culture is bad, you will remain lacking. Two, it can be mental. In Uganda, we have very many rich people, but they have a poverty mentality. Yes. They will never be satisfied with whatever they have. You know, that's why they are grabbing everything. They think, the world is coming to an end. They want to get this, they want to get this, as if they have been hungry for years. A very hungry person, once he gets the food, for example, in the village, there are people who eat meat once a year on Christmas. So you find they are very greedy. So it can be mental. Okay, so we also have mental poverty. We have also intellectual poverty. People have failed to come up with pragmatic ideas to solve the problem. We are poor intellectually. There is also physical poverty. When we, if young children are not fed well, they are not going to, their intellectual capacity will be weak. And they will even physically be weak. Differently, they are not going to grow to fight poverty. There is also psychological poverty. And what can I say more? Poverty, what is the opposite of poverty? You can say development. Then how do you define development? And now I want to go straight to what I consider to be the way forward. The opposite of poverty is prosperity. It is debatable. It is debatable. I think one way forward, we need to have, deliberate and conscious effort to transform life sustainable. And the government, Professor Sroma, has our mandate. Actually, the government has a duty or an obligation to lead us out of poverty. Yes, because they come back to us, they always come back to us to vote them into power, and they have the power. Power is the ability to act. We have given them the power to help us get out of poverty. We need leadership. So we are in poverty because we don't have robust leadership, robust governance. Okay? We are lacking that. That's a very big problem, and it will keep us in poverty. Awareness. Most of our people are not completely aware of the causes of poverty. We need to raise awareness, and it must start with us. Most of our people are not aware that we are poor. So ignorance, diseases, those things and many other problems keep us in poverty. We need to know, what are the causes of poverty? Why are we poor? We have been independent for 50 years. But why are we still poor? And we, as my comrade Kojo said, we have resources, but we have failed to properly tap and utilize resources for our own benefit, and even to create more resources. And we don't very much recognize the resources we have. We have people like a Professor Sroma. How effectively have he been used? He's a brain. We have many brains in Uganda. How much have we tried to tap and utilize these resources to our great benefit? That is a very challenge, ladies and gentlemen. Professor Kakonge talked of education, quality education. For me, I would seriously advocate for transformative education. Our education is lacking. People, go to school for over 15 or 20 years, and they get out of school, they can't even manufacture a safety pin. That's a very big challenge. Our education is not transformative. What? Transformative, yes, that's the word. Thanks very much, Professor, for talking about innovation. I mean, you talked of creativity. We need to encourage our children to have that sense of creativity, innovation. In the UK and other countries, children as young as 9 years are encouraged to come up with the computer programs, new computer programs. So those governments encourage innovation. This is a big challenge to us, to our government, to encourage innovation and creativity.
Mr. Chairman, I want to look at corruption from the point of deprivation, to deprive somebody. Mr. Chairman, corruption in Africa is largely a consequence of deprivation. Where, for example, you find somebody having large chunks of land and there are squatters around. This rich man continues to domineer that land and the rest remain as squatters and continue to suffer. So there is need for a radical paradigm shift in the redistribution of resources. Because I think Professor knows what is called Gini coefficient, which largely addresses the gap between the rich and the poor. You find that in Africa, we have very few rich people, and the majority are poor. So there is need for a central authority like government. That's why I strongly disagree with the liberal economics, the free market economy. It tends to perpetuate poverty, Professor. And I would like to raise some question. Professor, it has been argued that the free market economy is the engine of the economy. And the role of the state has actually been reduced. Do you think that this liberal economics will take us far? Then two, Professor, we have been relying on the structural adjustment policies of the World Bank and IMF. And people have raised arguments that it is this structural adjustment that is actually undermining our development prospects, because we are not focusing on social services, and yet the majority of the people are poor. So the lack of focus in that area has continued to perpetuate poverty. Then lastly, Professor, I want to ask you, you have been in government. How do we explain the failure of most of these anti-poverty programs that were instituted by government?
The economist at Makerere University, but also I'm a humanist and a thinker. Now, I want to begin from where you exactly stopped. Professor, you have been so much emphasizing the individual, and that is fine. The individual must put in a lot of effort to get out of poverty. But I think you have underestimated, even when you came later on the macro platform, you have still underestimated the role of government. And I don't know why you are shy to put government on carpet. Because when you say government is us, yes, we agree. Those who form government come from us. But it's not true that government is me. Entirely true. It's not practically true. There are guys who are making policies on my behalf. And I say that government is me. They are ministers. Professor Suruma, when I was reading economics at Makerere, I was told that you are among the architects or guys, brains we had at the time, who had to make sure that we have the SAPs, the structural adjustment policies. And there were tenets why these policies were brought. Hardly when President Museveni captured power finally, because they began when the vote was there, not completed, and the issues we are fighting until when you retrenched people, until when you say government cannot do business, you are doing the same things now. Because government is back again doing business. Then you say government couldn't do business, and you are the brain behind that. So you begin wondering, what were these policies for? And whether the SAPs you proposed are still relevant. Now, doctor, you talked about attitude. That is very wonderful. And you gave us an example of your sister. Now, this is more on the gender platform. I want to know if your sister is educated, if you're answering us, and at what level. Because of this perspective in Africa, where a girl was left behind and a boy goes to school, it may be the scenario, it may not be, but you have to explain why that your sister, you're a professor, and the best we have in Africa. Actually, about 2 years ago, papers were writing about you, and some of us are very proud of you. But what happens to the sister? Attitude. How do we help one another? Because we are saying we must help one another. How do we help one another? A good professor with a sister who doesn't know how to utilize the resources around her. Professor, you talk about people and you say we must work so hard. And I believe you forget a few economic principles at this level. That if people are going to work so hard, if people are going to be very important, contribute to the economy, which we are saying you must put in, and I agree, they must have the purchasing power, Professor. In Uganda, what is that purchasing power? Because we must be able to buy the services. You want us to pray to them. But the ability to buy them, that's why you have emphasized so much the role of government. Because if you tax us badly, if you steal our monies for the roads, if there are no subsidies for the agricultural sector, how are people going to have money in their pockets so that they can be able to purchase the products and contribute to the economy? So there is a problem, there is a disconnect there, Professor, which I thought you should also emphasize that government has a role here. Finally, because of time, it's very important. I want to thank my brother here, Kojo, about the identity of the African. There is a problem here, and the doctor somewhere, a professor, the good professor, Dr. Takling, I think also fell into the trap because he was saying, if the name is not imposed, doctor and professor, for your information, religious names are imposed on us as babies. I was baptized Paul, without knowing and wanting the name, until I said no, to this name. I changed it. I refused it. Because there is no one can tell me I'm Paul without knowing where it came from. I'm not African. What does it mean? So the names are imposed on us. And I want to ask, if there is a correlation, Professor, you have professors and doctors here, between religion and poverty. Because in Africa, it's the most religious continent all over the world, but the most poor, the most corrupt. So, what is the problem? Does religion also have a problem in creating poverty and mentally enslaving us to become less thinkers?
Okay, thank you.
So, someone was talking about country being foreigner owned. Let me give you an example of our banks. We have about 24 banks in Uganda. Only 3 are Ugandan. And what is happening? Only 3. Post Bank, Centenary. Okay? Yes. Now, only 3 from the research, at least are Ugandan, or 2. And you can imagine the policies we have as economists. You make the money today and you export it. Are you getting it? Where is our economy? Where is our pride?
Okay.
I want to thank you so much.
Thank you.
And also say, let us learn to live and let live. Thank you so much.
I don't want to tire the professor with questions and comments, because many of you have those. But I want to just give a definition of what poverty is to me. Poverty is the lack of basic needs combined with hopelessness, powerlessness, and helplessness to influence your condition. Poverty is the lack of basic needs combined with hopelessness, helplessness, and powerlessness to influence your own condition. And
I want to inform the precarian speaker that not all poor people are hopeless. They are hopeful. But the situation and the circumstances they find themselves in preempts their prospects from becoming real. Thank you.
Thank you. So I was continuing. Irrelevance, not welcome. What I'm saying is that these are the dynamics for me, as I've understood them for the African situation. The subsistence lifestyle, the lack of commercialization of economic activity. People are merely surviving. There is no commercial element to the economic activity. The other one is obviously the underdeveloped resources. But my friend Kojo mentioned the fact that Africa is not poor because of the abundance of resources. I mean, if you had gold, Bloje, and went to ask for a soda down, I doubt whether they would give it to you. Until those resources turn into the means that runs the economy, which is money. They seize, they are of no use to you until you can convert them into the means that runs the economy.
We are not hardworking people. That is the fact. We like things that are on the table, things that come easily. But I can assure you, yes, I can give an example.
Mr. Chairman, I would like to inform the current speaker that Africans are the most hardworking people, but the biggest problem they have is that they are dispossessed, they are deprived, they are exploited, they are oppressed. By the biggest problem of actually you cannot discuss the question of poverty without talking about the political economy of poverty. So the biggest problem is the leaders. Look at the
information I have for the current speaker is I should give you this information that Africans are actually hardworking. And one thing you need to know is that the only problem that is bringing poverty in Africa is leadership and the mindset of individuals in Africa. Thank you.
Is lack of discipline. That is the fact. It is lack of discipline that produces corruption, that produces embezzlement, that produces fraud. If we can have a foundation where everybody from the childhood to be disciplined.
Chairman, I salute the professors. Of course, members, when we are here, we are all Pan-African, but we have different versions of approach depending on the school of thought. Economists, I'm a teacher by profession, so I will approach in that context. Professors in Uganda, where the biggest challenge is coming from, especially on the role of government, is that the government of Uganda lacks the research departments that are really fundamental. For example, we are looking at these youth here, but I don't think when you go to government, they have statistics about how the youth is growing from the childhood up to when he will be employed in what? Government. For you are just talking about Makerere University, you don't even look at these individuals. Out of 100, even if 10 died, the government of Uganda cannot realize that. They only wait for the output. Secondly, in Uganda, Professor, there is lack of interministerial planning. If you went in the Ministry of Agriculture and asked them, how many graduates do you like from Makerere University to be employed there? That one is not their business. They wait until you are employed. In those developed countries, we are yearning for a child is planned for from young, when you are still young, and the government is aware how many people is supporting. A country like Uganda, I don't think they have even the statistics of how many Ugandans are there. So that one, we shall always talk about it. I can give an example as a teacher. When we look at what actually is causing poverty in our economy, when I look at the role of government, I come from Busoga. But so many times people have said, Usoga, there is a lot of what? Poverty. But Professor, I want you to make a very big research, especially on the banking sector. The banks are very good, but are you aware that there are some big capitalists, not even capitalists, because in Uganda we have not qualified that level. But what I'm meaning, there are some individuals with influence. They come to Kampala, they go to a big bank, you give them maybe loans at 15%, they go to Iganga, they give to a friend at 20%, the one at Iganga goes to Kaliro at 40%. So the local man is paying 40%, but the government thinks that the people in Kaliro are getting that money at 15%. These are people, you are seeing that their land is going, their property is going, but the government is thinking that what actually the interest rate the local man is paying is that one which is in their books. That one is not correct, and you can take research from Kaliro district. I can take an example. Another thing is that what is actually causing this is to relate poverty to the books which are written by the whites. If you are to solve the problems of Africa, look at an African. I can give an example. People are talking about defining poverty in terms of basic needs. We can be two individuals from the same family. When our father is very rich, I become poor, my brother become rich. When we are extended the same one, facilities, we can get this education, everything, but there is what we call lack to a larger extent, which is not defined in the books of the white man. So in African context, I want to assure members that if we had come up,
point of information, Mr. Chairman.
If we had come up with
information, because is that lack, those ones I'm trying to research, lack is never under correct knowledge. So once you apply your knowledge, you have correctly. That is according to my research. You go and research.
I'm saying that I'm a teacher. I go to the local person because I talk with the parents and I talk even to these various youth here. I'm saying don't rely on the books. First of all, look at yourself.
Dr. Suruma, in plain darkness as it is, I'm very disappointed. Either you are running away from the truth or you bumped into the truth. One of the two. Doctor, the opposite of poverty is wealth. Whatever I'm going to say is within those parameters between wealth and poverty. But I want Dr. Suruma most. There is no difference between you and your illiterate, literate or semi-literate sister. I'm sorry I don't know her level of literacy, but there is no difference. In terms of what Abrodi was saying, we are not poor. We are endowed with all these riches and wealth. But how comes, Dr. Suruma, when you were at the helm, UCB went, they threw your hands. When you were Minister of Finance, you never for 1 year ever read a surplus budget. They were all deficit budgets. Amidst all the wealth you have, what makes you different from you and your sister? Is it genetic? With all due respect to you, by the way. Because we might say, it is one family, maybe they think they have the same problem. No, you don't have the same problems. Cool, because you are a doctor. In Runyankore they say, Tokwatambwa, Okemochera. Today this whole table is flooded with doctors and professors, and we are still saying Uganda. The only thing I agree with you tonight is your description of corruption being that of a decomposing body. For as long as you are a Ugandan carrying a foreign name, Dr. Suruma, you are a decomposing Muchiga. That is what a Ugandan means. A decomposing Munyankore, already dead. A decomposing Acholi with 500 and so much hectares of land, already dead. but you are a Ugandan. I am very disappointed. Unless the doctor wants me to say hush, hush, yes, let me say the things, and I might get the cat out of the bag to say that we have a Dr. Surma here. I am so, yeah, thank you. I'm trying to be as courteous as possible. But you cannot be courteous. You say Plato in Plato's Republic tells you, bad cannot know virtue, but virtue can know some badness. I'm trying to be courteous, but I'm failing, and I'm sorry. That's why I said with due respect.
Okay, lastly,
how comes we are swimming? You are swimming. The word doctor means that you are swimming. You have had enough knowledge. But how comes when you come to present, doctor, you are actually showing me that you don't know? Professor Takling, Shakespeare once said, what's in a name? A rose would smell the same, even called by another name. But I tell you that a nigger in America would be different, called by a different name. When you call him a nigger, you take his self-esteem out. When you call him an African American, you give him some esteem.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Chairman, this is a very serious issue. Much as the issue of the name is being raised as a very important aspect of the African identity, I have not known how the issue of the name can relate with the question of poverty. How can they? I need a relation or a correlation for that matter.
The speaker continuously gave references of the Greeks and gave a reference of Shakespeare. How you're telling us you're very African, but here you are continuously giving references of Shakespeare, Greek mythology, and so on. Please be relevant to African issues.
Now, information postponed.
That shows you the gravity of the problem. That shows you the gravity of the problem. That we have gone to school, we have learned how to read and write, but we have refused to learn how to think. I'm a scholar. I have never been a protagonist of black supremacy, my brother. No. Back to the point. And in conclusion, Dr. Surma, with due respect to you, I think your presentation was tantamount to running away from yourself and from us all, because you have let us down. Then why have you been drawing a salary for all this long? And okay. Professor Kakonge, the Banyankore have a saying that is in Arabic, mark your name, my brother. Somebody is called Vincent. Vincent was the brother of somebody called Hernan Cortez. Do you know what Hernan Cortez did to the Americans? Okay. Thank you very much.
We shall get that next time.
Thank you. By choice. That's why Doctor put it right. There is when you made a word that here in Uganda, mark this, Professor Struma, that these things we have been doing. I have been in Iraq, I was with Martin, you can bear witness. I provide practical solutions to problems, not the assumptions and theoretical thinking. My questions are like this. There are 3 words in English. If we are to go on definitional aspects, there is a word lack, then there is a word chance, then there is opportunity. If your English vocabulary is below standards, you can think they mean the same. But let me educate you on this. Luck is not always chance, but ability to create opportunities. Have the youth been able to shape their economical destiny? The answer is a big no. If it was a yes, we wouldn't be here discussing this. As I conclude and summarize, because my speech will be as a mini-skirt, it's like this. One question.
Which you don't put
on. Do you know why they put ask ladies? Mini-skirts are long enough to cover the subject, but short enough to arouse the interest. Let me tell you this. There is one thing. Government made good programs, but with no safeguards. That's why they are non-effective on the ground. Military, I'm a security specialist. I have been in Iraq, I have been in Pakistan, I have been in Jordan. In Uganda here, people in the government, like you, doctor, sorry to mention, they are very happy using people, but not utilizing people. There is a big difference with Americans and the whites. The whites, what they identify, there is something good in you. They utilize you. But here, when they know it, they use you. And doctor, I wonder when you say that these are very well-intentioned good policies, but they remain on the paper. Swap, SAP, PIP, modernization. What was your role in designing them? And why were they designed anyway, if they are non-effective? I watched you on TV when you were lecturing the army officers in Mbuya. You quoted the soldiers. Mind you, the soldiers you are quoting, there is a difference between NRA and UPDF. A very big difference. On the paper it is the same. But there are laptop soldiers. They are good people with pistols here and radios. They have never killed a single person. And they are here boasting, we'll do this. Bullshit.
First and foremost, a descendant of Adam. Sure. Yes, I was created by God, just like all of us. There are some who call themselves humanists. There are some who call themselves atheists. You know, the Bible.
Actually, they don't call themselves. They are.
No, well, it is quite unfortunate. The Bible in Psalm 14 says, "A fool in his heart says there is no God." By the mere fact that you have talked about Vincent. Or by the mere fact that you have talked about Nwagaba, then that means that there is somebody called Vincent Nwagaba. So it is quite unfortunate that there are some people, there are some fools. I concur with the Bible here. We have fools.
Not here.
Not even here, we have them. No, we are not.
Please. Now, so, information, yes.
Point of direction. Mr. Chairman, is it in order for the precurrent speaker to castigate and allege that in this forum there are fools? Okay. We cannot spend our time coming here. This is a forum where we have to be open.
That's enough. The information
has to be ruled out by the information is this. There is no person who is a fool, my dear brother.
Well, now, can I again reiterate what the Bible says?
What has been ruled on? What has been not on? What has been ruled on?
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Chairman, I agree with you. There is a very good friend of mine called Moses Musana. I don't know how many of you know Moses Musana. Moses Musana runs an organization called Abeto. Abeto means always be tolerant. I'm an academic. I'm a scholar. You'll find the scholar. I have more than 2 degrees.
Point of order, Mr. Chairman. Point of direction, Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Chairman, it is not in order that the precurrent speaker begins to dilly-dally. Exactly. Instead, he should be moving on the subject matter of our discussion. Thank you.
About the categorizations of poverty, I don't even look into the psychological poverty, physical poverty, and I sum up the whole concept of poverty in 3 forms. I have looked at mental poverty and given its its characteristics, what it means. I've also looked at material poverty, but I've also looked at moral poverty. And I think the worst form of poverty, the two worst forms of poverty that we have in this country are mental and moral poverty. With material poverty, you can even hit a jackpot. Just in a day, you become excessively rich. You hold all the wealth that...
Okay, and lastly?
So for that.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Chairman, as I conclude,
Yes.
the biggest problem we have here in Africa is not because we are poor. We are actually not poor, we are impoverished. We are dispossessed. We are deprived. We have people who don't want to work with people with brains. For me, I stopped to be a problematizing, raising problems.
Okay,
I stopped reading from the book of Lamentations. I read from the... I stopped being a prophet of doom. I'm a prophet of hope.